Hello, hello. So we are back with another installation of The Neighbours Are Weird. This is part 5, and I've just seen that in the few weeks that I haven't been filming these, we're now up to part 7. So shizzle is about to get real, guys. So let's get stuck in. I have a lovely mug of coffee sitting here to keep me perked up. We're going to get stuck in with part 5. So this was actually posted 13 days ago, so they've been busy. So we ended part 4 where he's spoken to Marina and they've decided to meet, and the ending is, I want you to knock on the neighbour's door tonight if they aren't already outside. Try and talk to them. I'll meet you at your house tonight at midnight. I have a camera. We will record everything, okay? She finished off with a wave goodbye and headed home. I paused outside my own front door, taking a deep breath. I walked in and sat on the couch staring at the clock, awaiting the gates of hell to open at midnight. So that's where we ended the last one. So moving on then to part 5, the house was still, save for the faint hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the floorboards, which I hoped was just the house settling. I sat in the living room, the clock on the wall ticking louder than it had ever done before, the glowing hands crawling towards midnight. All the lights were off in the house except for the faint glow of a lamp in the corner. The dimness made every shadow feel alive. My gaze kept drifting towards the window, the curtains drawn tight. Somewhere beyond them, the neighbour's house loomed. I glanced at my phone, 11:48 p.m. The closer it got to midnight, the harder it was to sit still. I wasn't sure if staking out my own living room counted as normal. 11:57. I was leaning forward now, elbows on my knees, staring at the window like I expected it to move. The air heavy, the silence pressing against my ears. 11:59. The faint noise broke through the quiet, soft, rhythmic and unmistakable. Talking. I froze. The voices were faint, muffled by the walls and distance, but they were there, drifting through the night. They weren't coming from the street or any open windows. They were coming from the neighbour's yard. The clock hit 12, midnight. The voices grew louder, though I still couldn't make out the words. They were strange, garbled, almost like a chant, rising and falling in a pattern that didn't make sense. My pulse quickened. I rose slowly, moving toward the window. My hand hesitated over the curtain, the weight of Marina's warning suddenly feeling very, very real. I could go back to the couch, sit down and let it pass, whatever it was, but I didn't. I pulled the curtain back just a sliver, just enough to see. At first there was nothing, just the dark outline of their yard and the faint glow of a porch light. But then I saw movement near the edge of their property, shapes shifting and swaying in the shadows, just out of reach of light. The voices grew louder and my stomach churned. It wasn't just talking, it was more like gibberish, a language that I just didn't understand. The shapes moved closer to the light and I realised they weren't alone. There was something else there, crouched low to the ground. It didn't look human. I stepped back, letting the curtain fall, my heart hammering in my chest. Whatever was out there, I didn't want to see it any closer. And then as abruptly as it started, the voices stopped. The silence was worse. I waited. I strained to hear anything, but there was nothing. For a moment I wondered, was it over? If maybe I'd imagined the whole thing? Then came the knock on my door. I steadied myself against the door frame, my breath shallow and uneven. Dizziness threatened to pull me under, but I forced myself to grip the knob and pull it open. Marina stood there, her expression sharp, a camera slung in her hand. "Jack, I told you to meet me in the driveway," she said, her voice clipped. "What are you still doing in here?" The words caught in my throat. "I heard something. I saw something. Didn't you see it?" Her brows knit together as she glanced toward the house. "See what? I didn't see anything. It's creepy, sure, but I didn't see anything unusual." "No," I said, shaking my head. "There were voices and something. I don't even know how to describe it. How could you not see it?" Marina exhaled through her nose, the weight of her gaze settling on me. Whatever it was, it's not happening now. If you're sure about what you heard or think you saw, then this is the moment to do something. To do something? Yes, go knock on the door. I hesitated, the thought making my chest tighten. I don't know if that's a good idea. Maybe we should... Jack, she interrupted, her tone measured but firm. If we leave now, this is all just another story no one's going to believe. You want answers? So do I. I held her gaze for a moment, the quiet conviction in her words sinking in. She turned, already stepping away from the porch. Come on, she said over her shoulder. Let's finish this. Her footsteps faded into the dark and I forced myself to follow. I hesitated, my hand hovering near Marina's arm as she adjusted the strap of her camera bag. The house in front of us loomed like something out of a nightmare, the warped siding almost alive under the dim streetlight. My stomach churned as I tried to steel myself. You're sure about this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Yes, Marina admitted, giving me a tight, humourless smile. But I don't think you are. I frowned. What makes you think that? Because you're still standing here. Her words landed harder than I expected. She was right. I hadn't moved an inch. Marina headed towards the house, her confidence just barely convincing enough to make me follow. The air felt heavy, like the house itself was exhaling. I stood beside her, my pulse hammering in my ears. When she raised her hand to knock, I wanted to grab it to stop her, but I didn't. 2 sharp knocks. The sound echoed too loudly in the still night, reverberating like we'd disturbed something meant to stay silent. My throat tightened as we stood there waiting. For a moment nothing happened. The house was still and I let out a shaky breath. But then I heard it. Faint at first. The voices came again, low, garbled murmurs that sounded wrong, distorted, like words twisted in a way they were never meant to be spoken. Do you hear that? I whispered, my voice cracking. Marina nodded, her face pale. Yeah, I hear it. The voices were coming from behind the door, but not in any way that made sense. They weren't close or far. They were just inside the door itself, like the wood was breathing them out. My hand moved before I could stop it, the palm pressing against the door. The surface was cold and damp, and I swore I felt it hum beneath my fingers, like a faint, unsteady heartbeat. Jack, Marina whispered harshly, grabbing my arm. What are you doing? I opened my mouth to answer, but a creak from the door cut me off. We both froze as it shifted, opening just enough to reveal a thin sliver of blackness. It wasn't darkness like a shadow or poorly lit room. It was a void, a place where light didn't belong. Hello? Marina called, her voice trembling. Is someone there? The voices stopped abruptly. My pulse roared in my ears as I squinted into the gap. Was that movement? A shadow slipping out of sight. My fingers itched to pull the door open further to see what was hiding there, but I couldn't bring myself to move. I stepped back, my breath quick and shallow. I don't like this, I whispered. Let's go. But she didn't move. Her gaze stayed fixed on the door, on the space where the void pressed against reality. Marina stepped forward, her hand brushing past me to shove the door open wider. We're not leaving, she hissed, her voice steadier than I expected. Not until we know what's going on in there. I grabbed her arm. Marina, this isn't normal. That door doesn't lead to a room. It's something else. That's exactly why we need to keep going, she snapped, shaking me off. I'm not letting them write me off as crazy again, Jack. Not this time. I swallowed hard, glancing back at the blackness seeping out of the open doorway. It didn't feel like plain darkness. It felt alive, like it was pulling at us, daring us to step inside. My instinct screamed at me to drag her back, to run, but she was already getting her camera ready, the lens gleaming faintly in the dim light. You really want to walk into that? I gestured to the void, my voice cracking. Yes, she said, her jaw set, because if we don't, we will never know. Her words stung because she was right. I did want to know. The voices, the strange things I'd seen, all of it, it had me hooked, even though every inch of my body told me to run away. Marina pushed the door open further, the creak echoing into the night. The void seemed to expand, stretching like ink spreading through water, swallowing the faint light spilling from the street lamp. My stomach churned as the air grew colder, a sharp contrast to the mild night. "Are you recording this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Of course I am," she said, stepping over the threshold. I grabbed her arm again, more forcefully this time. "Marina, this isn't about proving a point. Something's wrong in this house. It's not just creepy, it's wrong." She turned to look at me, her eyes hard, determined. "You weren't the one that got put into a mental institution, Jack. But soon you will, if you keep talking about this and not have any proof." Before I could argue, she pulled free and took another step inside. The moment her foot crossed the threshold, the voices started again. Low, guttural murmurs that twisted and folded in on themselves. It was like they were coming from every direction, vibrating through the walls, the air, my chest. "Do you hear them?" Marina whispered, her voice tinged with something between fear and exhilaration. "I hear them," I said, my mouth dry. She turned the camera toward the void, the faint red light of the recording indicator barely piercing the blackness. "Whatever this is," she murmured, "it's real. It's all real." The words weren't comforting. If anything, they made it worse. But I think she was trying to prove it to herself and to whoever watches the tape one day. I think in a weird way this was making her feel relieved. She walked further inside, vanishing into the darkness. I stood frozen for a second, staring into the space. It seemed to grow darker with every breath I took. I followed her, my feet slow, cautious, like the ground might give way beneath me any second. The air in here was thick, heavier than it had any right to be. I snapped my head up, realising I'd been focused so intently on my feet that I lost sight of Marina. "Marina?" I called out, my voice shaking. "Where are you?" A low hum answered me, but no voice. I took another step and something clicked under my foot, a loud snap that echoed through the hall. That's when I saw it, the faintest outline of her standing at the far end of the room, her back to me. She was staring at something. The shadows around her seemed to stretch and shift like they were alive, pulsating with something dark. "Marina," I said louder this time as panic started to take hold. She didn't turn, she didn't move. She just stood there frozen. I stepped closer, but every inch I moved felt like I was sinking deeper into the dark. The temperature had dropped and my breath came out in sharp, visible gasps. The air around me pressed in, thick and suffocating. I was almost to her when I saw a flash of movement from the corner of her eye. I spun around, my heart in my throat, but there was nothing there. The whispers had grown louder, a chorus of voices now, but they had no sense. The same voices I had heard every night. When I turned to Marina, she was an eyelash length away from my face. Her face was a shade of dry cement mixed with green bile. Her mouth hung wide and crooked as if something had broken it from the inside. The veins in her face bulged out and looked a sharp breath away from popping. The stench she gave off came straight from hell itself. It smelled of burning flesh and coagulated blood. I stumbled back, grabbing the camera out of her hands and pointing it at her as I fell onto the floor, my heart slamming against my ribs. My mind screamed at me to move, but my legs felt paralysed, as if rooted to the spot by the grotesque image before me. I opened my mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Marina's eyes, wide and vacant, locked onto mine. Her pupils were black voids, swallowed up by something far worse than mere darkness. Then just as quickly as she had appeared, her head jerked to the side, as though she'd heard something, no, felt something. She stood perfectly still for a long time, almost too still. Then her mouth twitched, and the faintest of smiles curled up on the corners of her lips. There was nothing like the one I had ever seen before. It was as if her body couldn't remember how to make a smile, but it was trying anyway. I felt my throat tighten. This wasn't her. This wasn't Marina. "Marina?" My voice finally cut through the silence, trembling with fear. Her smile widened, impossibly wide, like it wanted to devour everything around it. The moment she spoke, her voice was a guttural rasp, barely human. "You're not crazy, you know." Her words hung in the air, heavy and unnatural. "I can prove it to you now." Wow, that was awesome. I am excited now for 6 and 7, so I am going to cut this ending short and we're going to get stuck in because I just want to see what becomes of this. And I wonder, is number 7 the final part, or will there be more after that? If you haven't subscribed already, I would love if you would click that button and the wee bell notification so that you keep up to date with all my new videos coming out. I have a lot more of these scary stories and some more Am I the Asshole videos. I also have some more in the pop culture side of things as well. I think I have an update coming soon on the whole Bonnie Blue situation, and some talk about different MLM companies. Because it's Christmas, that is one that really becomes crazy at this time of year. But anyway, if you aren't a subscriber, please do so. I would really appreciate it. And if you have any creepy stories or something that you think I should talk about, send it through to lindseysworld21@gmail.com. That will be along here, lindseysworld21@gmail.com, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.